Good Tuesday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. A little bit later in the show, we'll talk Guardians as they have a middle game of a 3-game series against the Rockies over at Progressive Field. But we begin by talking NFL and Browns draft end of this week. But take a look. After the Aaron Rodgers trade is official, this is the Game Day NFL ranking the top quarterbacks in the AFC. Again, just AFC. And Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, 1, 2, and 3. Lamar Jackson, 4. Deshaun Rodgers, 5. Aaron Rodgers checks in at 6. Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert down at 9. And Russell Wilson of the Broncos checks in at 10. With that, let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Jeff, you look at that list, and I don't know that a conference has ever been that stacked at the most important position in the game. It's a gauntlet in the AFC.
Well, first thing, I think like the caveat to that tweet was 3 of those quarterbacks will not be in the playoffs this year. So it's crazy to think, that's how deep it is in the AFC. Look, a lot of it's going to come down to other factors, though. I mean, as much as, quarterback is the most important position in the game, guys who make the plays, key tackles on defense, a turnover on defense, one team being able to run the ball, even if they have a great quarterback and, basically eliminating the other team's good quarterback. It's going to be fun in the AFC. It really is. Obviously, the number 1 overall pick, Carolina, that's going to be, it would be, imagine, if that poor kid, would be number 1 overall and be going into the AFC into this mix. So it's probably good that that's the way that worked out. But, the AFC is a who's who at the quarterback position right now.
Yeah, and you look over at the NFC, and it's a much easier path to that position. And that it's kind of flipped from the way it was only a few years ago.
Oh, you definitely can see that. We all knew this, Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert age was coming, and eventually, the balance would be shifted. At the time, though, when we were thinking that, we thought it was going to be a longevity thing. Nobody thought Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers were now going to be guys playing in the AFC as well. So, definitely a shift of balance there. And like quickly, it almost basically happened in about a season or two. Once Russell came over, he certainly started to shift the tides. And now with Aaron Rodgers, and you look at the AFC, AFC is alone. I mean, you got 3 great quarterbacks right there. It's hard to find a division where you can't basically stand up and make the fight for 2 to 3 quarterbacks as being the best in a division, which you don't normally necessarily have the opportunity to do.
All right, we're going to turn our attention to the draft for a little bit here. So this is from the Bleacher Report. Browns' top targets in the 2023 NFL Draft gets underway for the Browns on Friday. They list Keanu Benton, defensive lineman from Wisconsin, more than just an upside pick, 6'4", 309-pound Benton. Could contribute early as a run defender while developing under Schwartz into more of a disruptive all-around defender. Benton's an interesting guy. He may not be there at 74 for the Browns, though. I've seen a lot of mock drafts that have him going earlier in that 3rd round.
Well, for me, first things first is, the question here would be, do you think then is Keanu Benton a possible guy you would trade up for? Me, yeah, I think he is. And you get to, these draft rankings, you run these draft simulators, and you get to 74, and a lot of times, if you're trying to go deep tackle or you're trying to find a DN, it's like, the proven commodities are gone by then. But Keanu Benton at 6'4", 300 pounds, good athleticism / great athleticism for his size. You throw in a high school wrestling background, understands leverage, how to take advantage of his man. When you get locked up and it's, one-on-one, somebody's got to be the better man. He's really good at that type of stuff. And I think him transitioning, and I think the write-up is probably good from Brent Sobleski and his team, in that, he can contribute right away as a run defender. But I think the athleticism, the body type, it translates to some of these defensive tackles, Fletcher Cox. I'm not trying to put him in that, class yet. The type of body, the type of athleticism, the type of background that I had in college, he would be a guy that you could find, a path where he would probably be a really successful player under defense coordinator like Jim Schwartz.
Another guy that they list as top targets for the Browns in the NFL Draft, linebacker Noah Sewell from Oregon. Sewell, a prospect Cleveland should have a chance to target in the third round, be a great addition to the new look defense. Fourth-ranked linebacker on the Bleacher Report board. Strong run defender who can bring additional pressure on third down. I would imagine they look to draft a linebacker. Not sure if Sewell's the guy. That sounds good.
I'm okay with drafting a linebacker, where, they have Sewell going. I think there's guys you could probably get who maybe have a little bit more proven production and guys who have a little bit more proven athleticism a little bit later on. And I'm sure we're going to touch on one or two of those guys before we finish here today. But if you look at this Browns linebacker room, you brought back Anthony Walker, you brought back Sione Takitaki, and I have no issue with either of those players coming back, both proven commodities. But both are coming off, serious leg injuries. And these guys you wouldn't normally classify as fast linebackers anyway. I think the Browns, look, we know the Browns under this regime, do not want to spend a lot of capital money-wise on the linebacker position. So if they can find a way to get a guy, in round 4, possibly round 5, who comes in as maybe one of the most athletic linebackers they have, and then they can start maybe saying, hey, nickel situations, JOK and said rookie, both guys run, really active, really quick to the ball. It's probably a situation they would like to get to. But, yeah, they probably definitely want to add some speed to that linebacker room. And the other key is going to be, is he going to be able to contribute right away in defense? Because the Browns signed 2 linebackers to play special teams. So, anybody that they draft, they've got to be ready to take game day reps at the linebacker position, not in addition to special teams as well. Because those other 2 guys, you signed them to play special teams, they're dressing every week.
So here's another one, the third of these 3 for the Bleacher Report. They go Tyjae Spears, running back Tulane, 5'10", 201-pounder. Isn't the biggest back, but he's a nimble, quick dual threat who doesn't lack pass protection skills. Ran a 4.47 40 at Tulane's Pro Day. Burst straight line speed the Browns believe that Kareem Hunt no longer possesses. So let me ask you this. How important do you think it is that the Browns go and draft a running back, and who do you like in that draft class?
Well, for me, there is so much talk from everybody about the wide receiver, and with the addition of Elijah Moore, you now have Donovan Peoples-Jones, you have Amari Cooper, and you have Elijah Moore. How many reps are these guys not going to be on the field? So you have Marquise Goodwin, you have David Bell, and look, I think the Browns, obviously, the scenario is for those guys to be the fill-in pieces. Even though it was just 1 year for David Bell, they're going to give him a second year. Then you have about 5-6 guys fighting for maybe wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 on this roster. That's not going to be guaranteed reps, nor is it going to be guaranteed that you're even going to play. You're going to dress to play on game days. Where I look at the running back position, and look, Nick Chubb, you want to play all the way up until the Super Bowl. You can't have Nick Chubb go out and tote the rock 20 to 25 times every week and then expect him to be remotely close, to effective in January. It's not a realistic thought. And that is not counting the fact that he misses time. Look, Jerome Ford, if you think Jerome Ford is it, that's great. But you only have 8 carries from last season. So there's no way anybody is winning the debate on whether or not Jerome Ford can step up and be a meaningful running back for this team. We don't know. There's no proof either way. But the other thing is, if we're losing Nick Chubb, and even if it's a limited amount of time, I don't believe anybody believes that just one guy is going to come in and give you what Nick does. You're going to need somebody to handle the running aspect of it. Now, who's going to do the stuff when you actually take Nick Chubb off the field and maybe have a running back who can be involved in the passing game? That guy is not necessarily on the roster. Look, Tyjae Spears, I would love to bring in Tyjae Spears. Tough player, him on the offensive side of the ball, teammate Dorian Williams on the defensive side of the ball. They carried that team. I know somebody who plays on the Tulane, team currently. They rave about the type of leaders they are, and those are the kind of guys you want to bring into a clubhouse. There are other guys, though. Sean Tucker out of Syracuse. It appears his medical, issue is, at least cleared enough where he was able to have a pro day yesterday. Benched 29 times, same amount of number Nick Chubb did back in the combine back in the day. Former 55-meter sprint champion, 100-meter sprint champion, 200-meter sprint champion. So he didn't run yesterday time-wise. I think that's okay when you have that as in your background as well. He can contribute in the receiving game. Kenny McIntosh out of Georgia, another guy who's probably maybe a little bit better receiver than he is an actual runner of the football. these are guys the Browns need to look at, because it's not so much you're looking at life after Nick Chubb. And look, to be smart, you probably are thinking somewhere along that line. But the fact is, if something happens to Nick Chubb, it's going to take at least 2 running backs to replace him.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I like what I saw from Ford, but a real limited sample size. Let's take a look.
And there's one last thing. Everybody universally thinks that this is a really, really good running back class. Everybody universally thinks this isn't such a great wide receiver class. So I'm not going to chase the wide receiver, who most likely is not going to play for me anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you. So we mentioned linebackers coming back from injury. This is good to see from Sione Takitaki. Coming off an ACL injury, you like to see the movement. Again, it's just good to see everything intact, getting out, trying to get ready for preseason and get back on the field. So Sione Takitaki posts this workout, and certainly good to see him making progress towards getting back to where the Browns want him.
You know, it's always difficult, when you get an injury like that, an ACL in December, are you back week 1? Are you back week 2? Are you back for October? Nobody has any idea, and everybody's, return path is different. But a guy like Sione, who everybody just appreciates and was really probably playing the best football of his Browns career when the injury happened, putting him at Mike a little bit, you saw a different side of him. He was excited about it. He was always a guy that played an outside linebacker position, whether it was, Sam, or even back at BYU, he played some D end, and you saw him kind of grow into it a little bit. But it was the best thing to do for both parties, because it's really difficult for a guy like Sione coming off an ACL to go to a new organization. And what if the rehab process is slow and he's not back by the time they had hoped, and now it creates a little friction? The Browns, the organization loves him. He loves being here. It gives him a chance to get healthy. He can put together, hopefully, 10, 11, 12, 13, great games of really, really good tape, and that everybody sees where they are at the end of the year. And, Sione got the opportunity, hopefully, to, a pretty good second contract in the NFL.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll dive in a little deeper to the draft. We'll take a look at some linebackers. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Dane Brugler from The Athletic, draft expert, talking about some linebackers that are likely to be on the Browns' radar.
Let's take a look at a few linebacker prospects that could be on the Browns' radar. The lane linebacker Dorian Williams checks a lot of boxes that will interest the Browns. 6'1", 228 pounds with almost 34-inch arms. He is a fluid mover in pursuit and in coverage, and he filled up the stat sheet with over 300 tackles the last 3 seasons. Just throw on the Cotton Bowl tape against Caleb Williams and that USC offense, and he was all over the field, which should continue in the NFL. Another mid-round target that might interest the Browns, Auburn's Owen Pepo. He's a freak athlete. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash at the combine, and you see that speed on tape. He might not be a great fit inside, but does a great job on the outside where he has that first step explosion and gets where he's going in a hurry. There is definitely a place on the roster for his twitch of athleticism and explosive power.
Jeff Lloyd, we talked about the need for a young linebacker. You like either of those two? What do you think?
Well, first things first, what I was saying earlier, the Browns would like to get younger, cheaper, and faster at the linebacker position. Dorian Williams, 4.47 at the linebacker position, running his 40 at the combine. Nothing to sneeze at, but then you mentioned a guy who runs a 4.39. the key, and you've heard this, and you heard it from Myles Garrett the other day speaking about when he talked about Jim Schwartz's defense. We want to be able to have the guys to win up front and the guys to be able to chase them down behind us when we don't. Well, a linebacker runs 4.39, yes. Linebacker runs 4.47, yes. Dorian Williams was a beast at Tulane. And look, him and Tyjae Spears, and I got to this earlier, what these guys did and the way they were able to rally the troops there and the season they put up this year was an incredible story. The guy shows up every day, punches the time clock. As far as playing, the middle linebacker position, stack and shed, whether it's coming towards the ball carrier or, going through the trash, trying to go east and west to carry, get down a ball carrier. He's physical. He does not lose his explosiveness or his speed, through contact, through fighting off blocks. He's a really, really fun linebacker. And he's going to be a guy who's going to be a Mike in the NFL for as long as his health will permit. And he will be a 100-tackle guy per year. He just has that type of ability.
So let's take a look. This from the Bleacher Report. Best kept secrets in the upcoming 2023 draft. They're going to start out with a tight end, Zack from Old Dominion, 6'7", 255 pounds, ran a 4.55 40, 40-inch vertical, 6.87 3-cone. Those are really good for a tight end, especially one that's 6'7". Running back from UAB, Dwayne McBride, 3 years at UAB, averaged 7.3 yards a carry on almost 900 carries. 5'10", 209, thick build, and he pinballs off would-be tacklers. And then wide receiver Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss, and again, this is a guy that we keep hearing is climbing draft boards. Comes from the same program that had DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, and Elijah Moore of the Browns. 4.46 40, 39.5 vertical, 22 reps at 225, and a 9.86 relative athletic score. That's something that registers with that Browns, that RAS. So those are three guys that are really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if Kuntz is, if he's around in 6th or 7th round. That might be a guy that the Browns kind of bring in as a tight end.
Yeah, well, Kuntz, the thing that scares you is, he's the guy you kind of want to work with. Otherwise, you see him in, maybe year 2 of his career, and he's beating you to death while catching passes, for the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Chiefs. Like, this is a guy where you might not see much his rookie years. You get acclimated. You got to keep in mind he's coming from Old Dominion to the NFL. But once he does, all of a sudden, now that he knows what he's doing and against competition that, he is athletically ready for, maybe just didn't have enough knowledge for it, and now all of a sudden he's going to start really, really making plays. McGuire is interesting. Kind of gives me a Ray Rice vibe as far as a running back. Just gets to the hole, and then, you see 2 guys on him, and the next thing you know, he's still running downfield. Meanwhile, the 2 guys kind of fell to the ground. Mingo is interesting because, everybody talks about slot wide receivers, and everybody thinks these Cooper Kupp, these 5'10", these 5'11s, and Mingo's not like that. He's a bigger guy, plays on the inside. He's better on the inside. He kind of plays almost like a post position offensive player in basketball, where he's just bigger than most guys that are going to cover him. And in some cases, even linebackers, because that's how big and physically thick he is. And then he has the athleticism to do what he wants afterwards. All 3 of these guys definitely, good. Mingo, it's tough I think with the recent hype, it's hard to put him in a sleeper list, because, there's probably a lot of talk that maybe he's a top 45 player at this point. But, a guy like Kuntz, a guy like McGuire, where you can stash him, work with him, and the Browns are certainly going to have that opportunity, because with all the picks they have, they still have a decent amount of picks, not a lot of holes necessarily. So to get a guy that you say, hey, the best year for us, and when we really get to work with him might be 2024. That's not really, a waste of a pick here in 2023, because, the roster spots are drying up kind of quickly.
Let's take a look at a 7-round mock draft from Pro Football Focus. We'll take a look at the first 3 picks they have going to the Browns. So at 74, they go wide receiver Marvin Mims from Oklahoma. 98, they go with a defensive tackle from Texas, Ojomo. And then at 111, they have edge rusher from Ohio State, Zach Harrison, still being there for the Browns. So Mims, Ojomo, Harrison, what do you think of those 3 and the way they may fit into the Browns scheme of things, Jeff?
Well, my buddy John Costco from PFF did this, and I'll beat him up a little bit about the wide receiver position, because we'll have him on here before the week's out. Again, but I just don't know where the path to playing time is. Even if you truly love this wide receiver that you want to take here at 74, 98, I just don't see the big path to playing time right away. And if you're going to tell me, would I rather take a fifth defensive end there? Would I rather take another defensive tackle there where I'm less clear about where the path is for playing time? Wide receiver, I think it's clogged right now. No offense to Marvin Mims, really, really good player. Ojamo kind of fits here, and there's another guy I like from South Carolina, Zack Pickens. These guys are athletic. They're quick. They can come in, and Dalvin Tomlinson can kind of do his thing, and they're going to get the easier of assignment if they get snaps next to DT. Both those guys fit that bill. I have no doubt about that. Zach Harrison, the thing here is, 6'5", former 5-star guy, still has all the athletic traits. You're seeing if you can get more out of him. And it's always tough when a guy comes out of Ohio State because, he got really, really great coaching. But there's always going to be somebody that gambles. And, hey, maybe Jim Schwartz. And look, at 6'5", 270, he can kick into the interior, nickel and dime if they ask him to, rush the passer from there. If Zach Harrison can ever truly hit his potential, he can be a absolute 10 sack per season guy in the NFL. It's just a question of whether or not he can take that next jump. They thought it was going to happen at Ohio State. We'll see if it happens in the NFL.
Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast. Now I'm going to step aside, take another time out. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. We'll get into a fifth-year option. Do the Browns pick it up on Jedrick Wills? Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, this is John from Sandusky. I'm going to talk about Josh Gordon. He's getting down in the SFL. I don't even see why all the other stuff is relevant, because right now we need a wide receiver, and he's better than anyone we can get in the draft between round 1 and round 5. Why not give him a shot to try to make the team? Marijuana stuff is already over with. He's having fun playing football. Give him a chance. I don't even see why not. They got Deshaun Watson, and you got a thoroughbred person that's been in the NFL, and he's made his mistakes. Give him a chance. He wants to play for Cleveland. I saw an interview with him. He wants to play for Cleveland. He wants to come back. I just don't understand why we're so hard on him, considering everyone else has been through a lot of other things in our for the Browns. Let him have a chance to make the squad. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jeff, I think he deserves another shot in the NFL if he so desires and somebody wants to give it to him. I just don't think this would be the place for it. We've delineated Donovan Peoples-Jones, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore. There really isn't a spot for him with the Browns.
Well, and then the other thing is, with a player, of that physical ability, how do you tell him, okay, and we've seen this. Josh Gordon went and played for other teams. Hey, you might get 10 reps on all. That's maybe all I got for you. Is that a position where he's comfortable? Probably not. And then there's the fool me once, fool me twice, and now fool me. No, I mean, look, Josh Gordon, it's a great story. David is. And, everybody, I think, hopes all for the best of him. And now that the NFL maybe is resting on their laurels a little bit about some of the things that they're, testing players for, somebody wants to take a chance here, that's fine. I think Cleveland's just got too much invested into this season that they will not be the team that's going to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I always thought he was a really good guy that just I wanted him to get whatever issues he had resolved. I liked him a lot. I just think it would probably be better for him to go somewhere else as well. When you look at this roster, what areas do you think still need to be upgraded?
The glaring one for me is, and look, Perry on Winfrey, obviously the Browns have said they're going to stand by their man and, let this play out. Who knows the way it's going to work out. You brought in Dalvin Tomlinson at the defensive tackle position. Then you bring in Maurice Hurst. Then you bring in Tristan Hill. I'm all for Maurice Hurst and Tristan Hill getting some maybe good luck in their NFL career, because I don't think either one of them necessarily had the advantage of that. And, I would love to see things break correctly for them. And this is a situation, similar to Malik McDowell 2 years ago. Granted, all different as far as how player ended up in their contractual, obligation with the Browns, but very similar to that. But in the same respect, when Malik McDowell came here, you didn't say from day one, we're going to count on this guy. I don't think you can do that with Maurice Hurst. I don't think you can do that with Tristan Hill. So right now, the fact that you probably do not know or do not have the second starting defensive tackle on this defensive line, I think that is probably obviously the biggest hole right now.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I would say I'm a little concerned about linebacker just because everybody's coming back from injury, and
Sure.
But I'm with you as far as defensive tackle, and I think I'm probably a little gun shy because of how poorly the defensive tackles played a season ago. Let's take a look at this. This is interesting as well. So the Buccaneers picked up the fifth-year option on Tristan Wirfs, offensive lineman. What do you think happens with Jedrick Wills? The Browns still haven't exercised it. They have until like May. I think it's first week in May 2nd, something like that. What do you think happens with...
It's actually May 1st.
May 1st? What do you think happens with Jedrick Wills?
Look, I've taken, a little bit of, heat on this on Twitter. I'm not sure here. I think everybody just assumes it's a slam dunk. And look, it's not like it's the quarterback position where if you don't straight up announce it, it's going to get any run. Like if the quarterback, either if you announce it or you say we're not going to do it, that picks up a lot of, trending, obviously, within the people that cover the team. Not so much with your left tackle. But, you're basically saying, and if you don't do this before you start the draft, first things first is, are you looking to draft an offensive tackle, which is not good. Then the other thing is, if you didn't get an offensive tackle, do you make the decision, May 1st after the draft is over? And they have done this kind of in the past with other players, and that's okay. But it just seems if it was that big of a slam dunk and they were so stinking sure, why would you not just put it out there? We're good. We're picking it up, man. It's Jedrick Wills. We're huge fans. Or you're not sure, and maybe you don't pick it up come May 1st and say, guess what? We got one calendar year to figure out what is life after Jedrick Wills. So they'll say Jedrick gets year 4. We're not guaranteeing year 5. So A, we've got our eyes on looking on who could possibly be the guy that comes in, or B, he plays our hold card, plays out of his mind, and now, the ball is in his court, and we basically got to commit to his demands. And, I just don't think, and, ever since they re-signed Jack Conklin, this has kind of been my thought process here, because, you kept Posick, you have both guards under long-term deals, you gave yet another long deal to Jack Conklin, and, it kind of, for me, maybe makes, well, what are you doing there at left tackle? I'm just not sure. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I just think, the closer and closer we get, it becomes, in my opinion, more reality that it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, it certainly is worth monitoring and seeing how that plays out.
He's had 3 years with Bill Callahan.
Right.
Everybody wants to always give Wyatt Teller's growth to, and that's fine. If you want to give Wyatt Teller's growth to Bill Callahan, that's fine. But we're not saying the same things about the left tackle. And, you never, these conversations are always tough because you're talking about somebody's financial future. But it does seem like, there's definitely, a little water in the road here and some puddles as you're trying to cross the street here about whether or not they think this is the right move for them.
And again, we'll a couple weeks and we'll hear what goes on. This is kind of interesting as well. Dog Pound Daily. 3 Browns starters that could be replaced by the start of the 2023 season. Number 3, Browns defensive tackle Jordan Elliott. Number 2, Anthony Walker. Number 1, Donovan Peoples-Jones. And, Jordan Elliott, the first one we talked about, I'd be surprised if he's starting week 1 just because he had his chance and it was not great.
Well, Jordan Elliott, yeah, and the other thing is would anybody be happy if, after all that went on this offseason, we get to week 1 and then we hear that Jordan Elliott's the starting defensive tackle? I don't think anybody, is essentially, ready, for that in any way whatsoever. The Anthony Walker one, the question would be who's going to start over Anthony Walker right now. Sione Takitaki, you don't believe healthy. He's, look, if he can play week 1 at all, that's great. You certainly don't think he's going to start at Mike over Anthony Walker. If some of the linebackers we talked about today, if you draft them and you draft somebody in, the 4th or the 5th round, do you think week 1 they're going to start over a guy like Anthony Walker? I'm not so sure. And Donovan Peoples-Jones, that's where you get to like a little, hey, is there a little trickiness in the wording of this question? Because, your top 3 wide receivers, I don't necessarily need to say somebody is the starter. Now, does this mean that somebody is going to take reps at wide receiver other than Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and Donovan Peoples-Jones? That's different. I don't believe so. But I think there's a little trickiness in the way you're putting Donovan Peoples-Jones' name in there. Because, we know the Browns are going to play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. The thing that gets tricky is how much 4 and 5 are they going to play, because you have David Njoku and you obviously have Nick Chubb.
Jeff Lloyd and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, some players that could be gone, traded during the draft. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. So the Browns picked Martin Emerson 3rd round last year, and he outperformed a 3rd round pick. So despite covering top wide receivers, 89 targets, he never gave up over 81 yards in a game, never gave up over 23 yards of run after the catch during a game as well. And Jeff, that last one that's impressive for any cornerback, especially a 3rd round rookie corner.
Martin Emerson was special. And the thing is, he brought something different to the room right away. It was the size, the length. And look, Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward, they like to be active in run support. It's not always been as kind to them in return as far as, them taking some physical tolls. But yeah, Emerson is just that guy. And, I had said over the summer when the Eagles came to town for the joint practices, an acquaintance within the Eagles organization, and, I'd gotten a message within like an hour and a half of the first joint practice. The Browns got a special one, man. This guy is just different. And it's the length, it's the size, and it's the diversity within the room. And look, there's going to be a serious competition this year between he and Greg Newsome. I don't think anything's guaranteed to anybody, and the best guy's going to win. And there might be weeks where there's more reps for one guy as opposed to the other guy. These guys, it's a really good room right now. And you're hoping that the path continues where each other is basically pushing each other to become the best player they can be, as opposed to, friction, which we can know that can happen at times. But it seems like for now, everybody's on the same page. They love what they're hearing from Jim Schwartz, and they're already, really, really looking forward to getting to work together and learning a new system on the fly here.
So this is from Browns Nation. 2 players that could be traded during the draft coming up end of the week. They say tight end Harrison Bryant and wide receiver Anthony Schwartz. I can see Harrison Bryant. Anthony Schwartz, I'm not sure anybody's going to take a chance on that speed.
Well, Harrison Bryant, look, it's a tough spot. When you're where you're at in your contract and they go out and sign another guy and, a little bit more than you're making this year. It kind of seems like maybe the writing's on the wall there a little bit. Anthony Schwartz, I'm not sure what the value is. But ideally, and, I don't, if the Browns could get something for him here, maybe they would answer that bell. But if they're maybe looking to move on from either one of these guys, the hopes is to, pump them up in the summer, get them some good reps, get something going. Because, for the two of them right now, I don't think they're hot commodities. So hopefully you can get them some reps in the preseason games. And the Browns are obviously going to have the opportunity with the extra preseason game, the Hall of Fame game, where maybe they can kind of feature these guys. And hopefully, they look really good. But I'm not really sure the return would be, anything more than maybe a 6th, 7th round pick. Schwartz has had his issues. And even if you wanted to trade Harrison Bryant, this is a ridiculously good tight end class. All are really good athletically. It's not the best time to be shopping a tight end.
Let's take a look. 3 players who could fall into the Browns' lap during the 2023 draft. Number 3, wide receiver, Parker Washington from Penn State. Number 2, a guy we've seen mocked to the Browns a couple drafts, Isaiah McGuire, an edge rusher from Missouri. And number 1, another guy that's been attached to the Browns in the 3rd round, Gervon Dexter from Florida. As you look at those, who are you intrigued by with those 3?
Well, I mean, look, you've heard me in the theme of the day, defensive line. Let's keep going here. You bring Jim Schwartz in, you're telling him, we're going to get you what you need. McGuire athletically matches up. The Browns have met with him, during the process, the guy they have shown interest in. Gervon Dexter is another guy that made the trip out to the Browns facilities. I think Dexter is a little bit further away from contributing than maybe Isaiah McGuire would be as your 4th, possibly 5th DN and as a rookie. But Dexter, look, it's 6'5", it's 310, it's good athleticism. And again, this looks like something. And what did we say about Benton? 6'4", 309, good athleticism. This is somebody you think that you could put with Jim Schwartz and say, look, the time put in, if the kid accepts it, if it all works out well, the potential is there to be a really, really good factor. I just think, Dexter probably a little bit further away. McGuire could be a guy that could probably, contribute as a reserve immediately. In the wide receiver position, again, it just seems stacked, and it's not a knock on any of these guys that would go in this range. I just think that there's the path there for more serious playing time from guys who play different positions. It's not a bias to the wide receiver position. I was one. I love the wide receiver position. But this room got fairly deep fairly quickly with the addition of Goodwin, and the fact that you have a whole bunch of guys, maybe stand-ins waiting there to say, hey, I'll be wide receiver 6 for this team.
All right, before I let you go, assuming somebody falls in that mid to late 2nd round, give me a name or 2 that you think Andrew Berry should trade up and go get if they're falling a little bit.
Well, the one we did mention earlier, Keanu Benton, but I will go with Derek Hall, edge out of Auburn, 6'4", 260, speed to power player, tested phenomenally at the combine. And one of the things was they made him do linebacker drills. You're never going to ask him to do linebacker drills. You're not going to draft him, but you got to kind of see overall athleticism and what this thing was what he's able to do. And you put on Auburn tape, and they weren't a great football team, but there's guys getting 13, 14-yard runs against the Auburn defense. The guy who's dragging them down from behind is Derek Hall. So a motor like that, the fact physically he's what you're looking for, athletically he is what you're looking for. He is a micro preemie like my daughter is, which means he was probably born in the under 3-pound range, and now he's a 6'4", 260. Everything about the guy is something to root for, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal player in the NFL. And he's one of these guys that I talked about earlier. When you start looking at draft boards, when you start looking at draft simulators for the Browns at 74, you're like, man, a lot of what I really liked is gone now. So is this, are these guys that I'm looking to maybe, bump up for? And, Andrew Berry, he always plays it close to the vest. We've seen him move up, obviously, with a player that maybe other teams weren't sure of 2 years ago in, JOK. This could be a spot here where the Browns, hey, if a guy gets within the striking distance and they know, they really need at least minimum one more guy in the defensive line, whether it's inside or outside, the opportunity might just be too great that they just can't turn it down rather.
Jeff Lloyd, Locked On Browns podcast, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best. Always a good time, Dave. Everybody have a good day.
Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Locked On Browns podcast, always really good Brown stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cleveland Guardians, getting ready for a game against the Colorado Rockies. Zack Meisel, Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We turn our attention to the Guardians getting ready for Game 2 of a 3-game series against the Colorado Rockies. Peyton Battenfield will be on the mound against Ryan Feltner, a local kid, getting the start for the Rockies. Last night, Cal Quantrill, not a good one for the Guardians as they lost 6-0 to open the series. Terry Francona talked about that and Xavier Curry and the pitching situation for the Guardians.
Oh, I thought it started with his fastball command. He was scattering his fastball and kind of started from there. You know, you look up and what's 3 1/3, 10 base runners. That's a lot. You know, we come in struggling, and you hope that continues. I'd say, he used his fastball to both sides, and then he spun it. Well, kind of like Smeltzer the other day. Similar, not the overpowering fastball, but got ahead and then started spinning it. I was talking to Chris and Cherney before the game, and I said, I'll try to stay away from this kid because I don't want to force anybody's hand. That's not why we're here. But I didn't know where else to go. He's done a really terrific job in a really tough role, especially for a young kid.
And he's talking about Xavier Curry in the long relievers role. So through the first 23 games, this is what it looks like. Guardians now 11-12. They were 10-13 a season ago when they got hot and made that run. They were also 11-12 in 2021, but they finished that season 80-82, 13 games behind the White Sox, who won the Central that year. Let's welcome in Zack Meisel, Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic from Progressive Field. And Zack, it hasn't been the kind of start that you wanted. The first road trip was good, but it's been a struggle since.
Yeah, it's weird because you can point to a bunch of different things, and I think in some cases you think, all right, this seems fixable, and in some cases you're wondering, maybe not as simple of a fix as I would have thought. And the first road trip, everything looked great, and you're thinking, all right, maybe this is going to be the one year where they actually get off to a decent start in April. They had a pretty easy schedule coming up here that's supposed to pad that, and it hasn't turned out that way at all. And it's a very weird start. I think they've been forced to make some decisions on the pitching front earlier than they would have hoped. I think guys offensively have struggled, and they haven't been able to play the brand of baseball that they like to play. So it seems a little lifeless at the moment, and just not really sure where it goes from here.
I know you wrote an article, worrisome early season trends. Take us through that and kind of what you arrived at with that.
Yeah, I just think it's 162 games, and everyone goes through a rut at some point, and when that rut happens early, it's easy to panic, and it's easy to say, what are we going to do about this? It's easy to think that that's just the new norm. And that's not the case. I mean, Josh Bell's the perfect example of someone who had a really good track record, got off to a really slow start, and the last 2 weeks he's been great. And we've forgotten how he was slugging 0.79 through 10 games or whatever it was. So there are things that are correctable, and there are things that it's more difficult to envision the solutions. And I think that's the part where it's a little early in the season to be feeling like, I don't know if this is the rotation that's going to lead this team to the promised land. Or, boy, I thought that this team would hit for more power, but I'm starting to wonder if maybe I was mistaken by that. So there are just things that we need. You need a longer leash. You need a larger sample size to figure out what's real and what's not. But you can't just say it's early forever. And we're going to get to a point where you need people to perform, or you're going to have to look at alternatives.
Yeah, and we haven't seen Jose Ramirez put everything together for 4 or 5. Even he gets to where you can see, okay, now he's starting to hit. I thought we were there, with the game against the Marlins on Sunday with the 3-run homer. What have you seen as you watch Jose?
A lot of junk, and that's not him. That's what pitchers are throwing him. Far fewer fastballs than he's ever seen. And it makes sense when you think about it. What does he like to do? He likes to take a fastball, and when he's hitting left-handed, yank it to right field. We've seen that over and over for years. And pitchers know that. They're not stupid, but he's so good. He has such good plate discipline that he can wait you out. And you can try to get him to chase something out of the zone. He's not going to do it. And eventually you fall behind in the count. You have to throw a strike. You have to throw a fastball. And that's when he burns you. But the thing is, there's no more shifting. And pitchers know that it's easier for him than it ever has been to yank that fastball through the side. So they're not going to give in. And I think for the first 2 weeks, he was super patient. And I think at one point he had 12 walks and 5 strikeouts. And that was the way he was going to have to do this. That was the adjustment he was going to have to make, is if they're not going to throw him fastballs, he's got to lay off. And he'll take his walks. And eventually Josh Bell and Josh Naylor or Oscar Gonzalez, whoever's hitting behind him, will heat up. And the guys in front of him will start to get on base more often. And they won't be able to just throw him junk out of the zone because there will be nowhere to put Jose. So I think he sort of got out of that. And he started chasing more. He had a 4 strikeout game in Detroit. So you just need him to sort of figure out what's going to make sense as an approach moving forward. And make pitchers adjust to you. He needs to be dictating the action, and I think he'll be fine. But it is a little frustrating because you see it in glimpses, and you start thinking about, man, what could Jose Ramirez do with restrictions on the shift and being fully healthy finally? And you start to wonder if he can win that MVP award that's been elusive. Hasn't quite been the start that I think he or any of us were hoping for.
The other thing is guys getting on base, and Stephen Kwan went through a stretch where he had a couple series back to back where he wasn't on base, and Ahmed Rosario hadn't. I think if you get guys on base, he starts to see a little bit more fastballs because you don't want Kwan and Rosario. They will get on and run. Miles Strauss from the bottom of the order too.
Exactly, and that's the style that they want to play is just making you annoyed. I mean, teams hate to play them when they're playing that style. Ask the White Sox last season. It's when they're slapping the ball all over the place and they're running like crazy, and they've been stealing bases and they've done it at a really high success rate. They just haven't gotten on base recently. And so, yeah, that's their identity. It's just they've sort of gotten away from that. And it does all start with getting on base, drawing walks, hitting singles, beating out infield singles, those types of things that against a really soft part of the schedule, they have not done for the last 10 days.
Yeah, and again, if it was buried somewhere in June, it wouldn't be as much of a, stick out as much. To that point, though, 23 games in, take a look at this. 90 runs scored. So the only teams that have scored fewer runs than the Guardians are the A's, the Royals, the Nationals, the Marlins, and the Tigers. So that's, and more than half of their wins have come against those teams that are struggling to score runs. So at what point do we become concerned about that, do you think? 23 games it's too small of a sample size, but as you said earlier, you can't say that as you're getting into, the middle of May and June.
I think it's just, I try to look at it big picture and what's the ultimate goal here? Because they got a taste of it last season. And so it can't just be, hey, win the worst division in baseball again and then see what happens. You want to feel like you are a threat to win a World Series. That's the next step. And they certainly don't look like that now. This is not a team that's going to have the Rays shaking in their boots right now. So how can you get there over the next 5 months? And what steps do you need to take to make the offense formidable enough that you feel that way? Hitting for power is certainly one of the answers, and that's something they didn't have last season that maybe was a pitfall for them when it mattered most. So can you get enough production from Josh Bell? You need Josh Naylor to turn it around. You do need more from Jose Ramirez, but I think the main thing, just to score more runs in general, you've got to have guys get on base. It starts with Kwan and Rosario, as you mentioned, and you have to go from there.
Zack Meisel, Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Logan Allen made a really good debut. Peyton Battlefield has pitched really well. We'll talk some of the Guardians' young pitchers. Sports for CLE will be right back talking Guardians. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Guardians, getting ready for Game 2 of a series against the Colorado Rockies tonight with Zack Meisel, Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic. So Logan Allen, Major League debut Sunday, comes up a quality start, gets a win in his first Major League start. Guardians may be dipping into that young, really good starting pitching again. James Harris talked about the Guardians' young pitching and the next couple guys, getting them ready.
Go back in our history, you look at guys like please, Zack didn't spend a lot of time at AAA, but you like to kind of see a little bit of AAA. There's some advanced hitters, whether that be young guys in AAA that have worked up there or guys who have bounced back from the major league level. You kind of want to see guys in those environments, see if their pitches are working there, how they respond to that. You hope to get them at the AAA level and see what they can do. They know that they're good enough. They're going to get their shot. So it's not a matter of how many guys they strike out on a Thursday night. It's more of like, what are their throwing program look like? What does their prep work look like? What does their preparation look like? What does the relationship with their catchers look like? And can you attack our plan for the night and see how that all plays out? So it's less about like, will I get a chance? It's like, I will get my chance. Will I be prepared when I do get it?
And again, talking about Gavin Williams, who is at AA Akron, as well as Tanner Bybee at AAA Columbus. And Zack, the Guardians haven't named a starter for tomorrow afternoon's game. Could be coming. But if it is Tanner Bybee, who had his start in Columbus pushback, he was supposed to start tonight. He won't be making that start. Daniel Norris will. They need to make a 40-man roster move. So what are some of the things that go into deciding, is it now Tanner Bybee, who's pitched really well at AAA, just like Logan Allen has?
It's funny. Everybody wants the top prospect to get that call, right? It doesn't matter when it is. It doesn't matter how many top prospects already gotten the call. Everybody's already ready for the next guy. And the funny part is, a lot of times it's not up to the player themselves to state their case and to prove that they're ready. It's things like a rainout and a doubleheader and or an injury. I mean, a lot of times it's something else that dictates whether someone gets that call or not. So the doubleheaders recently have certainly forced the team's hand, and I think Logan Allen was ready anyway because he had pitched at AAA for half the season last year. And the big thing that they like to see how guys rebound after facing some adversity, after struggling for a little while. And he got to AAA last year, and he had never had a bad start in the minor leagues. I mean, he breezed through the system. Big part of that just always being able to throw strikes, having great command. And he finally faced some adversity at AAA, and they kind of liked that because then it made him work harder this offseason, came back, had 3 great starts there to start the year, and then he came up and looked excellent in his debut. Tanner Bybee is interesting because he's sort of along that Logan Allen path where he came quick and he hasn't really had much adversity to face. And this is a kid who was throwing 90 miles an hour in college and now throws 98 and has really good secondary stuff. And another one of those Cleveland pitchers with great command. So, it's tough. I don't know that when the season started, they said, all right, let's hope that Tanner Bybee's up in late April. But a lot of times it's out of your control, and you have to prepare for those sorts of opportunities to pop up. And I think more than anything, you need the player to prepare for that to happen, where you have to go into a season, if you're at AA or AAA, knowing this could be the year you get your shot, and you have to stay focused and do what you can do wherever you are at the moment. But we saw 17 rookies debut last season. So I think in this organization, top to bottom, everybody knows they won't be afraid to call you up when the time is right.
And Bybee is a guy at AAA. He's 2-0, 1.76 ERA, 15 1/3 innings pitched, 19 strikeouts, 151 average against, batting average against. So he is really pitching well and effectively. The question becomes, the 40-man roster spot. You'd have to, and what that means, if people aren't familiar with it, you have to expose somebody to get claimed by another organization to create a spot on that 40-man roster, be it one of the catchers, a pitcher that, like a Connor Pilkington, somebody like that. And those are moves that this organization doesn't want to make before they're ready to make.
It can be a mess. And when you have as young of a team as they have, it becomes more difficult because you have prospects on that 40-man roster who aren't yet in the major leagues, but you don't want to cut ties yet. You don't want to expose them and let another team claim them. So it makes things tricky. I don't think the 3-catcher experiment is going to last until September. I think that's on borrowed time. I think Mabrice Valoria has like 20 innings caught this season and only a handful of at-bats. So that's an option. It's tough because it's April. There are going to be more moves. And every move you make is something that could come back you might regret later on. And you just have to have that forward thinking and sort of try to decide, like, if Tanner Bybee's the guy, Logan Allen is up, you have to, those guys are all of a sudden your 6th, 7th starters when Tristan McKenzie and Aaron Savali come back from injury too. You have to think about it like that. So how many starting pitchers do you want to devote a 40-man roster spot to? How many catchers? I mean, we saw Brian Lavastida, who had a really good 2021 and broke camp with the major league roster a year ago. And he was designated for assignment the other day to clear a spot for Logan Allen. So some tough decisions come from these things, and it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of headaches, I think.
The other question is, though, other than Shane Bieber, how long can you afford to be patient? Cal Quantrill has not. I mean, he had one good start, and yesterday wasn't good. Zach Plesac has struggled. You can't keep going to that bullpen. You got to get 6. Eventually, more than Bieber has to give you 6. Although Logan Allen did, you need more innings from the starting pitching.
Yeah, and that's to me, I think it goes back to what we were talking about last segment, where I can identify little things on the roster that will correct themselves over time. But this is a rotation in transition, and I think McKenzie will be back in a month. I don't really know what Savali's timetable is, but you're right. It's been very pedestrian. The starting pitchers don't throw hard. They don't get strikeouts, and it feels like a ton of traffic. Whether it's Plesac on the mound, even Bieber has been giving up a lot of hits. Quantrill certainly has. So you can't just assume that these highly touted rookies are going to come up and rescue you and save the day and lead you to a championship. But you do need to make some decisions at some point because you do know that even if those guys aren't the answers in 2023, they're going to be here beyond that. And at some point you have to decide, what, it might be best for us to let Tanner Bybee and Logan Allen and Gavin Williams just get some lumps out of the way now, and they'll benefit from it later. But it's tough to do because you're making these decisions in real time as the season's unfolding. And, it's guys are coming and going. McKenzie will come back, Savali will come back, and then maybe that's when you have to make some decisions on Quantrill and Plesac. Yeah,
and again, you expect to be a factor in the American League. And right now, you need a lot of things to change if that's going to happen.
Right, and then that's That's where it might sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but it is a little early. It's April. You don't need to have those answers yet, but you need to have a path to the answers. I think that's the key. Is last year at this time, first of all, nobody outside of that clubhouse thought there was a contender, but at least you knew when Bobby Bradley and Yu Chang and Bradley Zimmer and Oscar Mercado were in the lineup every day in April, you knew that those guys weren't the long-term solutions and that there were more intriguing options beneath the surface, right? So you had a path to whatever the next step was. So what's the path to the next step this year, which is to go farther than you did last season? Well, in the starting pitching side of things, it's clear that it's those kids. It's just when is the right time to pull the trigger on handing the keys over to them and finding another role or another home for some of the guys that you've been using.
Zack Meisel, a Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Zack.
You got it, Dave. Thanks.
Zack Meisel, make sure you check him out. Always insightful stuff with the Guardians as the beat reporter for The Athletic. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.